in a background of this, we've looked at different things. We've looked at key individuals. We looked at the vocabulary of Isaiah. We've looked at so many different key elements that he has brought. Tonight we're looking at key places. And I bring this in two parts here. The first is Galilee. And of course, we know that he has for such a long time talked about Jerusalem and Judea and the northern kingdom and stuff like that. But I like the naming of this because this is one of the things that Isaiah does here. Galilee is the northern territory of Israel, which is, Isaiah predicts this whole ministry of a man who's going to be of Galilee. And it's so amazing that that's out there 700 years before Jesus is born, and I'm just blessed by that. And then I picked the second part because a commentary person actually picked these, and I looked at these and I went, you know, I'm never going to be of a Jewish descent. That's not. I'm Irish, Hungarian in there, and a tiny bit of Indian. At least that's what my family tells me. But I looked at these 8 different places, from Babylon to Media to Assyria to Philistia to Moab to Syria to Ethiopia and Egypt. 8 Gentiles, that's you and I for the most part, unless you have Jewish blood in you. 8 Gentile nations upon which Isaiah pronounces judgment of God. Now, when we think about that, we sometimes go like, God really, really loved Israel, and he was really, really mad at the rest of the world. That's really not a proper concept of God and his relationship. For John 3:16 tells us, for God so loved the world. I love the Old Testament because there's little things tucked away. And I've actually been, even though we're still, 20 plus weeks away, almost 30 some, we're at 35 tonight, and there's 66. We're a long ways away from getting done with Isaiah. I've already been dreaming about where we go after Isaiah, and one of the books that I really enjoy is Deuteronomy because it talks about us Gentiles in it also. And it gives you some insight that when Israel is moving through the desert land and all the rest, God says certain things to Israel and says, now, everybody's fearful of you because of the rumor of all that I've done. All these miracles that I performed in parting the Red Sea and all the things that happened to Egypt, all the people of these lands are worried about you. But you're not to take their land. I have a land for you. You're not to take their land. So we sometimes feel like that Israel just took whatever land they wanted. No, God had a land that was their promised land, and as they're going on their way to the promised land, he actually said, don't take these people's land. In Deuteronomy, it's worth reading and some of those different things. And when I look at that, I go, wow, so God wanted something. And what I've been learning from this is he wanted a nation that all the other nations, all the Gentile nations would envy and say, we want that God to be our God. But so sad, that nation wanted to be like all the other nations. Israel, instead of saying, look how different we are, they wanted to be like all the other nations. Now, in the New Testament, instead of Israel, Jesus says, I want to build a community that everybody will say, I want to be a part of that community. That look what happens, that Jesus takes headship and lordship of this community called the church. And I so much want to belong and be a part of that kingdom and that community and everything else, and yet that community so much wanted to look like the world. Do you see kind of a parallel? What happened with the nation of Israel and what in the church? Some of these things really mash together as we get into chapter 40 and on. But I wanted to throw these 8 nations in here because to remind us that we're in this tonight. We're here, whether if you're a Gentile and you find us on the web or you're here tonight at the Ark Coffee House. This is us. For God so loved the world. Okay, with that background, you're going to notice something very different in chapter 34 and 35. You see, as I pointed out, that these 8 nations that we talked about, God's bringing judgment to them. And it seems like either an individual, a city, or a nation has been being judged through these first 33 chapters. Now we get into chapter 34, and the tone changes. And for whatever reason, 34 and 35 has that global, for God so loved the world, for God so was a world God, not just a nation of Israel God, that he's going to send his son. Watch the language in the beginning verses here of chapter 34. Come near, you nations, and listen. Pay attention, you peoples. Let the earth hear, and all that is in it, the world, and all that comes out of it. The Lord is angry with all nations. Did you notice he didn't say just the Gentile nations? He's angry with all nations. His wrath is upon all their armies. He will totally destroy them, and he will give them over to slaughter. Not good news right now. But you see the change in here. It's no longer a city. It's no longer a people. It's no longer a nation. It's the world so this is a very different part in history that the Holy Spirit is pointing to. All right? Verse 3. Their slain will be verse 3. Their slain will be thrown out. I want to read it from this. Mine has a little different translation. If you notice, I've gone to one of my older Bibles. My newer Bibles, I haven't liked its translation. I really love this translation. I've been looking for this NIV translation in the bookstore, but I haven't found it yet. So I'm going to read it from the screen up here. Their slain will be thrown out. Their dead bodies will stink. I don't know of too many dead bodies that don't stink. The mountains will be soaked with their blood. All the stars in the sky will be dissolved, and the heavens rolled up like a scroll. Does that sound familiar? And all the starry hosts will fall like withered leaves from the vine, like shriveled figs from the fig tree. Now, this first portion that we're going to get to, we're going to verse 10 through all this. We're going to see a lot of Revelation connections, and I've highlighted them in yellow. So we just highlighted two of them right there that you would have seen. You're going to see some more here in this. Verse 5. My sword has drunk its fill in the heavens. See, it depends in judgment on Edom, the people I have totally destroyed. The sword of the Lord is bathed in blood. Doesn't sound good, does it? It is covered with fat, the blood of the lambs and the goats, fat from the kidneys of rams, for the Lord has a sacrifice in Basra, or if you notice I put that in parentheses so you know where Basra is, it's Petra. There's a sacrifice in Petra and a great slaughter in the land of Edom. Go ahead. And the wild ox will fall with them, and the bull calves and the great bulls. Their lamb will be drenched with blood, and the dust will be soaked with fat. For the Lord has a day of vengeance, a year of retribution, to uphold Zion's cause. Now, Zion here is Jerusalem. To uphold Jerusalem's cause. All right, we're going to pause right there, and we'll look at some Revelation connections. And here's some connectors that you have on here as we go to Revelation connections into this first part of it. There's 5 connections that I saw within this that I wanted you, it's going to be up there as I talk about it. You write down what you feel like you want to remember, and you can look through it. Some of the scriptures I'll give you as we go through it. But you see the first one where it says, the heavens is rolled up like a scroll. That's actually John's words in Revelation chapter 6. And it says, and the heavens are rolled up. Now, what's really interesting, in creation, it says, and God stretched the skies with the stars and out. The Bible uses the terminology that science uses today about the stretching of the universe, the stretching out of it all. And if you stretch something, shouldn't you be able to roll it up? It's just an interesting thought. In other words, the language that's used in this and also in creation is a language to actually woo in the scientific world and say, how did people way back then understand different aspects of the universe? Just some very cool questions there. But you can see that there's a great connection between Isaiah and John, and we're talking now all those hundreds of years from when God gives John the vision on Patmos, that here's some of the same language here, that the sky will be rolled up like a scroll. All right. The second one is the starry host will fall. Now, I didn't want to put it up there, so I kind of wanted to have just a little interaction with you. Do you remember who tells us that the stars are going to fall from the heavens besides John? Someone actually told us this is one of the things. You'll see the stars falling from the heavens. That was Jesus. Yeah, I knew. I learned something in Sunday school when I was growing up. If you don't know the answer, say Jesus, and you can be right most of the time. All right? So, who said that the starry host will fall? Jesus did. All right, Matthew chapter 24, as he gives the different things, and the stars will fall. And so, Isaiah, now, so is Jesus quoting Isaiah? Yes, he is. Is John quoting Isaiah? Yes, he is. Guess what? There's only one real author, the Holy Spirit. So that's why you see this integrated divine message system, and it intertwines with each other through all that. And so some really powerful connections in here that for whatever reason the Holy Spirit said, I'm going to talk about the whole world. I'm going to talk about the nations, the earth, and the world, and I'm going to just talk about end time things 700 plus years before Jesus is even born. Pretty cool. The third thing, its smoke will rise forever. Where does that sound familiar from? That's a description of what? That's a description of hell and the torment in hell, that its smoke rises forever and ever. That's actually the lake of fire, Revelation. Okay, so you can see how this kind of works. Now, this is a strange one here. The sword of the Lord battles in blood. That's a more difficult one. Do you remember where Jesus comes, and it says that he is going to be riding on a white horse? Now remember, in a few weeks, we're going to celebrate Palm Sunday. He's going to be riding on a foal, a donkey. That's a king coming in peace. When the king comes on a horse, he's coming for war. So in Revelation, when it says he's coming in war and his robe has been dipped in blood, and on that robe are these words, King of Kings, Lord of Lords, and now, way before John gives that description, Isaiah is saying, and his sword is going to be dipped in blood. He's coming for war. He's fighting against the principalities, the powers in the darkness, and the evil that has so overtaken the world. This is his second coming, and he's coming to set up his kingdom, but he's coming for battle. So, you know we're in a series on Sundays, right? Taking off the gloves, trying how do we relate to one another, how do we have a Christ-like spirit and all the rest of the stuff. After Easter, we're going to do this two-part thing on the rescue that God did, and if you're going to miss any Sunday, if you're a Christian, miss Easter this year, because there's going to be a lot of people saved. But Palm Sunday is going to give you guys insights about being a Christian and the whole history of God's rescue for mankind. I can't wait to get to those weeks to preach it on Sunday. But this week, Pastor Pete's picking up, taking off the gloves and the standards, and how did Jesus even change the standards to work with people, and you know that we always hold a standard and we go, they're bad, we're good, and yet all have sinned, and so taking off the gloves and having devotion and honor and loving one another above yourself and all those different things. After Easter, we're going to go into this portion of who Jesus is, preparing for a battle. Preparing for a battle. Because once you have the heart of Christ, once you know how to relate to people the way Christ wants, there's a battle to be fought. And a lot of it we're losing. We're getting our brains beat in because we have accepted things that God wants us to fight. But we fight not against flesh and blood. That's why we're doing the first part, taking off your gloves. We fight against principalities, powers, and darkness in the heavenly realms. And so the 3 weeks after Easter, we're going to look at preparing for battle. Let me, so before the last one, it's a world judgment that's taking place, as you can see this. This is very futuristic, what the Holy Spirit's doing here. Let me just share a personal note here. Not far from here, what's Hollywood, about 60 miles? 60 miles from here. There's a church that was started 25 years ago. He's really a contemporary of mine. Actually, I'm 2 years older than him, and I started reading his books when I was a young pastor. I always thought he had a mega church because he was down here in the LA area. Actually, Hollywood is where he started the church, and he had this vision that he wanted to start a church where nobody else wanted to start churches. He still has a vision that he feels like God wants him to start churches beyond Hollywood, where his church has been for over 25 years, that he wants to go to cities that people are saying, we got to get out of these cities, they're God-forsaken. He wants to start a church in San Francisco. He wants to start a church in Seattle. He wants to go to the churches where everybody else saying, it's too hard to do churches there. His name is Erwin McManus. Anybody read any Erwin's? Okay, he pastors the church called Mosaic. He's just finished editing his 9th book. I've read all his other 8 books. I think I owed them all. I don't know if I still have them all because I loan them out all the time. As a matter of fact, to tell you how much I've enjoyed this man in my life, when I started dating Mindy, I gave Mindy his book called, it was his very first book he ever wrote, called The Barbarian Way. How to be a barbarian, that men are barbarians, and how do you be that for Christ? And I gave the book to Mindy, and I said, Mindy, if you like what this guy's saying, if you like this kind of thinking, you'll probably like me. If you don't like what this guy's saying, we probably won't be together long. You know, and so she said, I read that book going, okay, what's in this book that is like Kevin and, you know, The Barbarian Way? Anyway, Erwin kind of fueled early in my ministry the love for the Old Testament and finding these nuggets and the things in it. And he finds still, when I find his stuff, I go, wow. Now, I don't know if he goes, we've never met face to face. I mean, he's only 60 miles away. I've read his books, and I've been to conferences where he has spoke at and all the rest of the stuff. I'm sure he probably goes to our site, he found the ark, and he goes, wow, Kevin's really got some great insight in those things there. But really, I still go to his sites, and I go, wow, Old Testament insights. Oh, my goodness, Erwin, where do you get these things? He was diagnosed with cancer this last year, right before Christmas. Right before Christmas. And, you know, when your peers start coming down with these things, it kind of shakes your world. And I was wondering, Lord, how does a guy come through this? And to give you some insight in this, he's been a guy that's been sold out to a city, sold out to an area. And one of the things that, and this is the group I'll share it with. I probably should share it on a Sunday. Maybe I will down there. One of the things that's really been grabbing my heart is that as when you look at what kind of shape you want to make or impact you want to make with your life, you want to finally say, instead of I pastored here, here, and here, here's where I gave the best that they could get. And you guys got me probably at the height of my experience level, and through the things that he was going through and different things, God's been speaking to me, and I've been telling Mindy this. I said, I don't know, you know, the Church of Nazarene, they review you every 4 years, and since we got the 4-year review in January, I said, Mindy, I don't know how long God's going to tarry. I don't know if he's going to come back. I hope he comes every year. I always tell people, keep looking every year and stuff. But if he doesn't, I want to give my life to the Inland Empire. I want to give my life here to the Ark. Erwin's church, for the first 20 years, never was much bigger than the Ark Church is today. It was only 6 years ago that at Easter, for the first time, they broke 700 at Easter. This is kind of why I like the guy, because he wasn't into all the numbers, because he knew he was in a hard place to you know, hone out a ministry and stuff, where most other guys, when you're writing books and you're being called to speak at conferences and stuff, he should have went somewhere where he could have said, man, I'm pastoring thousands, you know, and yet he was there 20 years before they even got to 700 on an Easter Sunday. And you know, Easter, we could hit 300 on Easter Sunday right now. I mean, it just, because everybody and their brother that hasn't been to church comes for Easter. That's why we always pull salvations in this. In his process of looking at his life, I love what cancer has done in his call. Now, I would never wish cancer on anybody, but I watched the Sunday that he announced, right before Christmas time, that he announced that he had been diagnosed with cancer and that he was going to go have a surgery. He wouldn't be there for so many months, that he had to recover. And they found the cancer had gone beyond where it was found, and it metastasized, and it was much worse than they thought, and all the rest. And so it sounds really, really bleak. I watched his Sunday when he came back, and he went right back to the Old Testament. I thought, no, man, you need to be in the New Testament now, man. We got to be in the power of Jesus and everything else. And he kept on saying, you know, in the Old Testament, you feel like God has this love affair with Israel, and all these Gentile nations are just under judgment. And he said, but I'm one of the Gentiles. And I watched how God let the remnant and the thread, you know. And we've talked about this through Isaiah. It does this all the time. The remnant of Moab. Down the road is Rahab, you know. That Moab, could anything good out of the Edomites and all the rest, who would come good out of that? And it's Tamar's son, you know. The different, I mean, it's just amazing how from the Gentiles, all these remnants that are going to connect to the bloodline of Jesus, that God so loved the world. And Erwin is from El Salvador. El Salvador is probably like, okay, I'll be nice. It's better than the armpit, but it's not much better than the armpit of the world, you know. It's really not a great place to be from and everything else. And so he's really an immigrant to our country and came here and started a ministry and everything else like that. He married an Irish girl, all Irish. I can't even imagine that part of it. And I love his story through most of his life. He says they're fighters. As he comes to this, he says to his congregation, God gave me a vision 25 years ago, Mosaic. Now, I don't know if you know the vision of it. I remember that's what attracted me to his church 25 years ago. Broken pieces, that's what a mosaic is. Broken pieces, when they come together, make a priceless picture. Broken pieces that make a priceless picture. And I thought about, out of all the churches that God has called me to pastor and the different ones, and that in this stage of my life, the last 6 years I've been here at the Ark Church and everything else, and that when I came, you guys were celebrating your 100th anniversary and like didn't know what the future held and everything else. And all of a sudden, instead of a new chapter, we're writing a new book, The Ark, a place of refuge in the time of the storm. And as I watched his life and all the rest, something happened in mine that I realized there really is a battle that we're preparing for. Some are preparing for a physical battle, cancer. Others are battling within their marriages and everything else. And yet, in the midst of all this, God has given us this prophecy that there's all these other battles that are happening out there that are pretty scary. And in the midst of all that, I just wanted to let you know that my heart really has been so tender. He actually just came back from his cancer thing just 2 weeks ago to preach his first message. And when he said, I finally realized there's an expiration date on my body, on everybody's body, but there's no expiration date on my faith. And if you saw the movie La La Land, how many saw the movie La La Land? Anybody go see the La La Land movie? I was the only one. You guys are good Nazarenes, I tell you. You're really, really good. I probably, if I said Kong, the skull, yeah, Jack goes up. Yeah, a couple of the other things. All right, La La Land had all those 14 Academy Awards. Anyway, you might want to go see the movie. It's a very decent movie. It's an old sing-along, dance-along movie done today. And you know, anyway, the in Pasadena area, LA area, and where it's gotten really bad, El Rialto or whatever theater down there that used to be very glamorous in the 1920s and 30s now is like the armpit of that area. He came back to announce that they're going to do their first satellite from Hollywood to there, that God has opened up the door for them to get into that ancient movie theater that's now decrepit, that was shown so nice in its heyday in the La La movie, the La La Land movie, that God opened up the door through his cancer thing to have a contact with the owner of that. And they said, yeah, we'd love for Mosaic to take that over and do a satellite there. And he said, so finally, in a death struggle, my faith has been ignited again to see that my dream of going to the cities and the places where people have left, that God's letting us move back in. And I thought it was really, really powerful. And to me, this whole thing of end times, and we're seeing all this stuff, we sometimes want to rush on and go, that's it. But wait a minute. There's people for us still to reach. I'll throw out another movie that if you haven't seen it, it's worth seeing. Hacksaw Ridge. Okay, Bradley, I recommended that. You watched it this weekend. Okay, Hacksaw Ridge is World War II, and I love a Seventh-day Adventist man. That I'm going to give part of the movie away here. So if you want to watch it, don't. In one night, he rescues 75, as a conscientious objector, rescues 75 of his fellow battalion as a medic and lowers them down a cliff by himself. And through the whole night, he keeps on saying, Lord, give me strength to get one more. Lord, give me strength to get one more. Lord, give me strength to get one more. And he lowers them down. A Seventh-day Adventist, conscientious objector, and you get to meet him at the end of the film, the real person. He died in 2006. And as I put the Hollywood stuff together and all this, I'm going to tie it all together and we'll get on to this stuff here. We'll get done here really quick, honest, I promise. I realized that what God put in Erwin's heart is what should be in every church and every pastor's heart, and he's put in that, Lord, help us to get just one more. This Easter, Lord, help us to get one more than we did last Easter. And we had quite a few people that made a commitment, that came down and stuck a carnation into the cross that we had with all the holes on it. And we have a very unique thing on this rescue, and that every person is going to be able to have a rescue card that they've been rescued or they're looking to be rescued this Easter. And I'm so excited. And here's what I've been praying. Lord, I don't know how many Easters we have before you come back, but Lord, help us to get one more than we did the year before. Lord, if we had 40, 50 people that made a conscious decision last year, help us to get 41 this year if it was 40 last year. If it was 50, let us be 51. Lord, let us be something more. But Lord, help us now to figure out how to get them to stick. They don't just make a decision about you and understand these things, but how do they get the transformation that they go, I'm going to be different? That I need to go after the one more in my family that needs to get saved. And that's kind of been my prayer for it. And so these revelation connections and the end time stuff makes me go, okay, that's coming. But what do we do until then? All right, moving on to verses 11 through 17. Here we go. Did we even get to verse 10? Okay, 11. Yeah, I guess we did. All right. Verse 11, the desert owl and the screech owl, I'm going to read it again from up here this time. The desert owl and the screech owl will possess it. The great owl and the raven will nest there. God will stretch out over Edom and the measuring line of chaos and the plumb line of desolation. Her nobles will have nothing there to be called a kingdom. All her princes will vanish away. Thorns will overrun her citadels, nettles and brambles her strongholds. Verse 14, she will become a haunt for jackals, a home for owls. Desert creatures will meet with her hyenas and wild goats. I should have had the wild goats and hyenas in yellow here for you. Will bleat to each other. They're the night creatures. Now, they are the night creatures, but they make this sentence separate. There the night creatures will also lie down and find for themselves places of rest. The owl will nest there and lay eggs. She will hatch them and care for her young under the shadow of her wings. There will also the falcons will gather, each with its mate. 2 more verses, and then we're done with this chapter. Look in the scroll of the Lord and read. None of these will be missing. Not one will lack her mate. For it is his mouth that will give the order, and his spirit will gather them together. He allots their portions. His hand distributes them by measure. They will possess it forever and dwell there from generation to generation. All right. What is all this about? In your notes here, I would put this under the category of weird stuff and demons. All right? Weird stuff and demons. We live in a weird age, don't we? And let me just give you the 3 things that are up there. The jackals and the owls in the Hebrew could actually have demonic connotations from this aspect. In the King James, number 2, the King James Version translates the wild goat as a satyr, which is the mythical demonic creature. And the Hebrew for the night creature is the lith, or the female form of a demonic princess that captures children and men. Isn't that interesting stuff? Now, again, you've got to see this stuff in the Hebrew, and we just came through this scary setting, this scene of all these things are moving about, and it seems like they're the ones in control of the land. Now, before this, it's like we've seen a picture of Jesus is coming back to do this battle, and here's all these night creatures, whether they're demonic or real, are these real animals or all the rest, but there's this eerie, weird setting here. And in my heart, I really believe what's going on here in the latter part of this, we're showing that Jesus is going to show up as a rescuer. He's going to come on his white horse, and he's going to have his sword's going to be dipped with blood. It talks about the mountains with blood. This is the blood that's going to be shed. It's going to be the blood of the demonic that are here all throughout the land. Last week I shared with you that as prophecy things seem to get quiet and all the rest, there's always something going on. When you can't see anything going on, it means it's happening in the spiritual realm. And one of the reports that I've been reading the most is that the demonic and witchcraft evil things that have been going on, that have been out there, that actually several dozens upon dozens witches, concaves or whatever groups or whatever they call them, I forget the correct name, have joined together for one thing, to attack the United States and especially our new government. Not just our president, our new government. To attack it, to keep the nation stirred up. And so I believe that there's a lot of things happening in the demonic, in the spiritual realm, and I believe that Isaiah chapter 34 is giving us a picture of it. Now, 35 moves us. It's amazing how the Holy Spirit, when he shares kind of a weird, eerie, demonic setting and all the rest, 35 brings us right back to the hope. You and I represent the hope to the world. Let's pick up, there's only 10 verses in chapter 35, and here they are. We're just going to read them, and I'm going to give you the things in closing. The desert and the parched land will be glad. The wilderness will rejoice and blossom. Like the crocus, it will burst into bloom. Okay, I want to make sure we stayed in the same part of it. I didn't put a footnote. When we get down to verse 10, we'll look at it up there in just a moment. Like the crocus, it will burst into bloom. It will rejoice greatly and shout for joy. The glory of Lebanon will be given to it. The splendor of Carmel and Sharon, they will see the glory of the Lord, the splendor of our God. Strengthen the feeble hands, steady the knees that give way. This is referring back to what we do during all this weird stuff before here. All right? Strengthen the feeble hands, steady the knees that give way. Say to those with fearful hearts, be strong, do not fear. Your God will come. Oh, don't you love that? He will come with vengeance, speaking all the way back to the beginning of chapter 34. He will come with vengeance. With divine retribution, he will come to save you. Do you hear the hope that there's a message that's being given out in all this? Then the eyes of the blind be opened, and the ears of the deaf unstopped. Then will the lame leap like a deer, and the mute tongue shout for joy. Water will gush forth in the wilderness, and streams in the desert. The burning sand will become a pool, the thirsty ground bubbling springs. In the haunts where the jackal, okay, pointing back to this eerie time, the haunts, key word there, in mind there, the haunts is verse 7 there, and the haunts, and still up there. So get that eerie part, it's tying back to that. I think that's really, really important. In the haunts where the jackals once laid, grass and reed and the papyrus will grow, and a highway will be there. It will be called the way of holiness. The unclean will not journey on it. It will be for those who walk in that way. Wicked fools will not go about on it. No lion will be there, nor will any ferocious beast get up on it. They will not be found there, but only the redeemed will walk there. Now, here's a different word here. Only the redeemed will work there. Oh, no, go back. Go ahead, verse 10. And those the Lord has rescued. Now, in my version here, it says, those whom he's redeemed. But this is the actual truer Hebrew word here. Those the Lord has rescued will return. And they will enter Zion with singing. Everlasting joy will crown their heads. Gladness and joy will overtake them. And sorrow and sighing, no more tears will be there, They will flee. All of a sudden in chapter 35, after we have this eerie, demonic, weird thing, that all of a sudden there's a role to play. Guess what? Who's helping these people see that? It's the redeemed. They're the ones that walk that highway. It's the redeemed. Who are the redeemed in this story here? It's those that were redeemed during even the Great Tribulation. In verse 10 here, it tells you where those that before the Great Tribulation, where were they? Those the Lord had rescued will return. Okay, so let's look at the last things in the notes here. First, I see a restoration. We come through this weird revelation part and all the rest. The scrolls are going to be brought up, the smoke, and it seems like hell on earth and demonic stuff and all this kind of stuff. And now, here's 4 things I see. The desert shall rejoice and blossom as a rose. Folks, that's happening in Israel since 1967. Israel is blossomed like a rose. So much so that if you were here when we got to chapter 27, and it said this same exact thing, that Israel will blossom and it will be fruit to the world. And I used to say in the figurative part of it, yes, there'll be fruit to the world because the fruit of salvation will come from Israel, and the disciples and all that comes out of Israel. But since 1967, when they captured Jerusalem, and they started this irrigation of changing the salt water into fresh water and everything else. Today, if you Google it, the 3rd largest exporter in the world of flowers, blossom, and of fruit is the tiny nation of Israel. Landmass no larger than New Jersey, but they're the 3rd largest exporter of the world. What I'm sharing with you is these things are coming to pass right now. The desert shall rejoice and blossom as a rose. That's Israel. It's happening as we live. The weak people are strengthened. Shouldn't we be doing that before? If we get called out, if we're the ones that he takes away and we get to return with him, shouldn't we be doing this as a role model so that our children and our children's children and our co-workers and all the rest say, you know what, they were always trying to strengthen me when I felt weak. They were always saying, but God has faith. cancer doesn't have the last word. Yes, we all have a expiration date on our bodies. We don't know when it, I mean, we could go out of here tonight and the Lord will, and nobody gets hit by a truck or their car or whatever, and those kind of things, but we don't know when the expiration date is. But until then, shouldn't we help the weak people be strengthened and the sick and the diseased are healed? Shouldn't when people come around and they're sick with their sin, they're sick with within their relationships, and they're diseased by all the gunk of this world, all the crazy corruption in politics and all the crazy things, and I'm going to say something to you guys that I've been waiting to say for a long time, because I'm going to share this in the rescue mission on Palm Sunday, but I'm going to share it with you guys in advance, because I want you to think right in this realm. God wanted to be king to Israel. They wanted to be like all the other nations, say, no, give us a real king, one we can see. He said, no, they all fear you because I'm your king. That's why as you go through this land here, they're all scared because I'm over your people. And they go, we want a king we can see. We want to be like the other nations. And he goes, no, I want the other nations to desire to be like you, that I'll be their king. Then Jesus creates his community, the church. And he says, I'll be your king. We go, oh, no, God, what we really need is a political leader like someone like Trump that will give us so that we'll be protected and all the rest. Like, being protected is the most important thing for the church. That we feared the Obamas and the other things like persecution, and we couldn't handle it because we're so weak and we're so frivolous, and we just couldn't handle any of that bad stuff. And oh, God, give us a king like Trump. And Jesus is saying, can I be your king? You see where I'm going with rescue? This is the people that God needs today before he calls us out. I truly believe in a rapture, but before he calls us out, he needs a people that will help those that are weak, not point to political stuff. Man, if you put your hope in any political stuff, I want you to know, God has been independent. He's never been Republican. He's never been Democrat. He never will. And he aches over that we as Christians think our hope is in who the president is. He's king of the church. In our darkest hours are our greatest glorious moments. As I've looked back over my life, as I've been reflecting, when I heard Erwin had cancer, I've been reflecting, my greatest times in ministry were the darkest times where we didn't know if we could make it unless God came. Wow, can we get to those days again? And I'm preaching to a small choir here tonight. Weak people strengthened, sick people healed, and abundance replaces lack. You know when that happens? When you're in the kingdom and you let Jesus be king. I believe this is for us, and he calls this. He didn't call this for the independent church mosaic out there. He didn't call this for the Baptists. He didn't call this and we got. He said, I'm going to show you a highway. And I'm going to call that highway, this is our last part, the way of holiness. Whoa, wait a minute. Lord, the movement that you put me in, the holiness movement, has a role to play according to Isaiah 35. The holiness movement has a role to play in the last days. Yeah, if we remember these three things, it's a narrow and pure way in this life, a promise that the redeemed will walk there, and those rescued get to come back and serve with them. Could that be the rapture? You bet it could. But I wanted you to hear, out of all the things, Hollywood, Azusa Street, and all in L.A., 60-some miles away, over 100 and now 8 years or 9 years, whatever it is, a holiness movement started called the Pentecostal Church of the Nazarene. That close to where we are. We're one of the first churches that the associates went out from Brazil and came to Redlands 105 years ago. Not so that we could say, boy, I hope that someday we'll be able to do this and we'll be able to do that. You know what? We may be just a remnant. But Jesus only had 12 men, and man, he turned his world upside down. I want you to know, as God tarries, I plan for you guys to get the best of what I got in my spirit. But I'm going to start from this day forward, tonight, as we prepare for this Easter, the rescue. I believe it's going to be the greatest Easter that we've ever had, that we're going to ask those that use the rescue card that, hey, yes, this is a get out of jail card. This is a do not burn in hell card. Yes, this is I will be saved and transformed. And we're going to say, but this is how you step up. And we need you here for the next 3 weeks to get battle ready. To get battle ready. And that's where we're going. And I wanted you guys to know here on a Wednesday night, because many of you are my prayer partners already. I want you to start praying. That something inside, the tenacity in people's hearts, that instead of saying, well, that's just an old A-frame building, what can happen in that? That's what they said. Can anything good come out of Nazareth? And they called him the Nazarene. That's how we got our name. Could anything good come out of this movement? And yet, in Isaiah 35, the way of holiness, it's the highway. And you and I happen to be the ones that are supposed to pave that highway with these kind of things of God happening in our lives. What a challenge. I think he's asking us all to step up. You agree? Let's pray.